Hello, everyone. It's so nice to see you all. We have about 50 folks so far loaded up into the event, so it's so nice to see you. My name is Michael Myers. Yes, that is my real name. I have the privilege of serving as Director of Admissions at the Yale School of Management, primarily supporting the MBA admissions team. And I'm joined by some really amazing students whom I'm going to ask to introduce themselves in a moment here. But I just wanted to sort of set the tone for tonight's event and the subsequent events that are going to be happening this week, should any of you all be attending. And so right now you're partaking in what we call the Inside the Community series, which once a year we sit down with our students and meaningfully bring them together in front of you to discuss not only things around identity and some of the different affinity groups that we have on campus, but things we hope that you'll be able to take away as you prepare your applications. And for some of you who have applied in round one, decide or start making the decision on where you might want to attend business school. And so without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic on over to Linda, and maybe you can popcorn it over to the next person to introduce yourself briefly.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. I'm a proud member of the Michael Myers fan club, so always love to be here for him. So my name is Linda. I am a second year MBA. I was born in Shanghai and grew up primarily right outside of Detroit in Michigan. Before SOM, I was in startups and startup land. So that mostly looks like I was in like the startup ecosystem. I worked at a startup, and then finally, I was essentially working within building community in an accelerator space. So now that I am here, I'm mostly looking for my next adventure. I'm very actively involved with Dorm Room Fund, which is a fund that is at universities across the US that invests in student-founded startups. Over the summer, I did impact investing. So I'm most likely going to end up in a bucket that has to do with like venture and tech and startups. Haven't decided exactly where I'm going to go yet. At SOM, in addition to Dorm Room Fund, which is not specifically SOM related, I am the co-president of the Asian American Pacific Islander Student Association, and proud member of Consortium, and was involved with the Mang Impact Investment Fund last year. And so with that, I'm going to popcorn it off to one of our first year leads of APIA, the Asian American Student Org, Brian.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Linda. And I'm very excited to see everyone join us for our programming tonight. My name is Brian. I came to New Haven from San Francisco. I lived most of my life in San Francisco Bay Area, but I've been all over California, including Fresno and Sacramento. Before I came to SOM, I was a labor and employment attorney for 5 years. So I did a lot of human capital work with the California construction unions as well as their public employees. I'm very proud of the fact that I get to work with such a diverse group of people prior, and I thought that I wanted to kind of build up upon that work without the litigation aspect. So that was sort of my decision for coming to SOM. Right now, I'm mostly focused on human capital, workforce development, and general management strategy. And so it's recruiting season right now, actually. So we've been very busy sending out our applications and just talking to various representatives from these firms. So happy to kind of talk about that process. I'm also involved, as Linda said, in APIA. I'm a first year professional development lead. I'm also involved in General Management Club, which I think kind of is a umbrella branch for everyone who comes in from a non-traditional finance background. And I'm also involved with SOM or Yale's Sci-City program, which is a startup slash venture program. And there we're working on a product to kind of connect startups with fractional executives. And so one thing I'm looking forward to this year is we got our first customer. So I'd love to see kind of how that plays out and where that's going to go. I'm here and supported with my lovely partner. So she moved all the way from California over to here. She's a teacher. We came with our cat. So if anyone has any sort of questions about the partner experience, I'm happy to go more in depth on that. And with that, I'll hand it over to Maiya.
Thanks, Brian. Welcome, everyone. I see some familiar faces that I've already talked to, so great that you're here again. My name is Maiya. I'm a first-year MBA candidate here at Yale SOM. I'm originally from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but I moved from Dallas, Texas, here to New Haven a couple of months ago. Prior to SOM, I worked in healthcare consulting based out of not spotlighted. Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm fine. Anyway, so I worked out of a small consulting firm based out of Chicago doing healthcare consulting. We did a lot of new market entry. We did some insourcing and contract affordability for healthcare payer companies. And then I actually will be going to Bain and Company Chicago this upcoming summer. I did the base program. So if you have any questions about pre-MBA applications and that whole process, please let me know. I'm happy to help. And then what am I currently doing at SOM? So I'm more so, because my internship is secured, I'm more so looking at my long-term aspirations, definitely choosing SOM because of the business and society mission. So looking into philanthropy, looking into social enterprise, looking into community service. So I'm in student government as one of the first year chairs for community service, then also part of philanthropy conference, and then also nonprofit board fellows. So right now, thank you. Right now, just exploring my interest, and I'm super excited to continue to develop those positions. But in this capacity, I'm here with the Black Business Alliance. I am the AVP for Missions and Retainment. So happy to be here with you all. And I also had a partner when applying to business schools. He's currently in Dallas, so we are doing long distance. So if you have any questions about that, please let me know. And I'll pass it to Malik Dent, who's our president of BBA.
Hi, everyone, and I'm like, I always get so excited hearing our first year's chat. So my name is Malik Dent, and I am from Chicago. Before business school, I started off my career as a middle market consultant at a firm, as a business advisory risk consultant at a firm called Grant Thornton. Then I went to the city of New York, and most recently, I was chief of staff at the New York City Mayor's office. For those curious, I got to work under both de Blasio and Adams. This summer, I was interning at the Rockefeller Foundation on the Chief Operating Officers team, working at the intersection of public and private partnerships. And that is what I'm looking to continue after business school. And yeah, as Maiya mentioned, I'm the president of our Black Business Alliance. I'm co-president of our Gallup Capital Nonprofit Board Fellows Yale chapter, where I serve on the board of the YMCA. And I am one of our co-chairs of our Title IX Working Group for Prevention and Response. So I will pass it over to Nathan.
Thank you, Malik. So I'm Nathan Perez. I am a part of ALBA, which is the American Latina Business Association. We never call it the full name. We always go by ALBA. So I had to double check, make sure that was right. Before school, I was at PwC in their valuations practice. So essentially, we were valuing the goodwill and tangible assets of after an acquisition. So just as fun as it sounded, which made me want to pivot to business school. And here I've made a pivot to consulting. So I'm also at Bain, just like Maiya. And I think this will be a recurring one more time. I was a base scholar. And then I had an internship last summer, and then I am going back full time. And then within the at SOM, I'm also in consulting club leadership. So essentially helping people try to get jobs in consulting, not just Bain, but anywhere across the board. I'm a nonprofit board fellow like Malik. He's leadership, and I am on one called Changing the Air Foundation. I'm on the soccer team. I'm a proud hockey booster, so I watch people play hockey and learn how to skate while I sit on the sidelines with an innocuous drink in my hand. And then other than that, I also came to SOM with a partner. So I can talk about that. I moved from Boston with my partner. We got a dog here, so now we have a pet. So living in New Haven has been great with that. And I'm looking forward to meeting you guys. I'll pass it over to Kane, sorry.
Hey everybody, I'm Kane Akar. I'm from Miami. That's my hometown. I did undergrad at UPenn on the rowing team, varsity lightweight rowing team actually. After undergrad, I had a few roles, but most recently I was at the Hershey Company doing strategy and data analytics. And I was doing that in a little bit in LA and then in New York City, leading up to SOM. Also, like Nathan and like Maiya, I also did the pre-MBA base program with Bain. So I'll be interning in the New York office, not with Maiya, but spiritually with Maiya. Um, I was also a member of the consortium when I applied to school, and clubs I'm involved in here. I got to think there's a lot to do and a lot that you'll be involved in. I am in the grad crew club, perhaps unsurprisingly. There isn't an explicit fishing club at SOM, but there is a Yale-wide fishing club, and I'd love to yap anyone's ear off about that. I'm also in Alba and Alas. There are two very similar but distinct Hispanic or Latine clubs here at Yale, and either of us are happy to speak to the differences between the two of them. Happy to meet you all.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for introducing yourselves. I honestly have the easiest job of the hour, which is giving these folks a platform and a guided discussion for the first few moments. And so I'll just go over what to expect. I have a set of questions that I plan to speak to these lovely students about. And then we'll conclude the panel portion of this conversation so that you all can go into breakout rooms that won't be recorded and have sort of one-on-one candid conversation. I'll actually stick behind here to answer any burning admissions questions. But the students are going to handle all things culture and identity. And so I just came back from a 4-city swing last week. I spent all last week in Philly, then DC, then Manhattan, then Boston before returning back home to New Haven. And one of the questions that I got on the road in every city was, Michael, tell me what is distinctive about the students at SOM, which as an AO, it's incredibly hard to answer that question because I've had so many different interactions with our students in various capacities. And so I've been around SOM for about 4 years, and I've had a couple of different roles, all of which allowed me to work pretty closely with students. And that through line that I saw, anyways, throughout the different ways that I've interacted with students is this idea of collaboration, right? We are a school, obviously, that centers our mission on training leaders for business and society. And so I think we're a little self-selective on that front. But to me, the most salient characteristic of that that I've seen in our students is this idea of collaboration, particularly in my case with administration, right? These students are always leaving an amazing impact and thinking about how they can shape SOM going forward, even after they leave. But I think what's more interesting is the idea that folks are wanting to know, what is the culture like at the school? And so I want to go ahead and ask a few of our students to answer an SOM culture question. And so if you could define culture perhaps and tell us a little bit about how the environment welcomes students of color particularly. And anyone can jump in here.
I can give this a shot. Again, my name is Brian. It's very good to meet anyone. I think there were two very big things that I considered when I was going through all the different business schools. The first was, I think Michael talked about, is collaboration. Coming from a legal background, I think it's very much a zero-sum game. And so I was much more intrigued about the advocacy component of my work rather than I think I mentioned the litigation part. And one of the mindsets that I kind of feel as I was talking to students here and then being part of the community is that we really believe that everyone can win. I think that we believe that you can have businesses that are making a lot of money but also doing lots of good in the world, and I think I was sold on that part in particular. And that mindset comes from the collaboration. I think you guys will see if you end up doing recruiting that everyone here is invested in the success of everyone else. Nobody's trying to sort of take, I guess, any portion of the pie away from you. And so that was very important to me. And that's how I would define a lot of the experiences that I had with the culture. But that's just kind of my initial thoughts.
Yes, I can go next. I can speak a little bit more towards like the culture as a person of color attending Yale SOM. So I feel like immediately off the bat, I feel like everyone is coming from such diverse backgrounds, whether it be like different ethnicities, whether it be from different countries, and then also just like different like job experiences, school experiences, experiences overall. So I think that coming in on like day one, that's something that I feel like most people of color like have anxiety about, like, am I going to fit in? Like, is this the right place for me? Like, I think that that was like all like not like that was not the vibe at all during orientation. Everyone was so welcoming. I feel like I always had like a smiley face that like I could go and eat lunch and sit down with, and I think that that continued on from orientation. Actually, math camp first, then orientation, and then class. So I think that like that's always been how I've felt here, is that I've never have like been going through either a tough time, or maybe I'm tired, or maybe I'm super happy and I want to share great news and I haven't had someone to tell that to, or someone that I'm like getting to know for the first time. Like I can still getting to know people because people are so open to like building those connections. So I just want to say like I don't want anyone to feel like this is like a place that doesn't like isn't going to value you for your diverse experiences. I feel like that's all I've been learning is about people's diverse experiences, and I've been like giving my own story out as well. So we have voices as well for a platform if you really want to go into the depths of it. But definitely, I feel like that's the culture, at least that I'm seeing in the past couple of months here.
Amazing. Thank you, Maya. I wanted to say, as you and Brian were talking, I was sort of reminded of this idea that most people are shocked about at times, but Yale SOM beyond our domestic population is roughly 41% international, right? And so for a business program the size that we are, we have roughly 350 students in a class. This year we had slightly a few more. As an incoming student and being located in New Haven, Connecticut, where many folks here stay here on the weekends, I like to tell people that if you're coming to this school, you're choosing to literally do life with your peers. It's not transient in the same way that some of the other programs are. Um, you know, 41% of the student body is also international, right? Which brings a whole nother subset of experiences and expressions and things that require us each to not only teach one another about ourselves and our lived experiences, but also to learn, right? And so I think part of the beauty of our affinity clubs, which these are three of the six, is this idea of it being a place that's open to the entire student body. I think largely for those discussions to happen, right? Sometimes they happen in really fun ways. Sometimes they happen in forums. I think Voices is another student-led initiative, one of my favorite things that I see our students doing around campus, that are really helpful to not only get a breadth of exposure to different experiences, but a depth of exposure to your classmates. And so switching gears here a little bit, I'd love to hear maybe from some of our second years, how does SOM, create and craft learning environments? We are committed, obviously, to equitable learning, and making those environments, I think, fun and, high quality. But what are some of the resources, initiatives, or even programs that you might have encountered over the last few years or couple of years, because you haven't been here that long, that have impacted your experience as a student of color, particularly?
I can jump in here. So fall one, we are on a quarter system. Fall one is hard for everyone. It's just everyone's getting back into school. All the first years here just survived fall one. It's almost like a rite of passage for everyone. And it's just super math heavy, homework heavy classes that I initially struggled a lot with. And I kind of at this moment, I was like, oh my God, I'm an Asian person who's like just apparently terrible at math. I'm not. Like, and I think that it's just like, it's very easy to feel that way. But your peers are so supportive. And I think this plays into the first thing where it's like, it doesn't at all feel like it's a zero-sum game where everyone's out for each other, even though, yes, we are graded on a curve. Like, I survived. I'm still here today because my peers were willing to go out of their way to help me. and to get all of us across the finish line together. Like I distinctively remember there was one day I was like freaking out over a probability piece at like 11:30 p.m. And I ended up calling a friend. And by the way, you're put into these learning teams. So you have a large learning team of about 7 to 8 people and a small learning team of about 4 people. I got really lucky and I still am really great friends with my learning team. Despite us being from completely different corners of the world with completely different backgrounds and experiences, which also plays to Michael's point that we are very international. It's been really awesome getting to kind of see all of our perspectives come together. I called someone who was on my large learning team, but just someone I, considered a friend. And I was like, oh my God, I cannot figure this out. I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, I don't know why I'm stuck. And she immediately was like, okay, Linda, is it okay if I put you on speaker? Because I'm actually in a conference room with like 5 other people. And guess what? We're also doing this problem set and you're going to figure it out. Like, we're going to help you figure this out. They're like, where are you in the problem? What have you thought about? And that was really awesome for me to hear because I came directly pre-SOM from a environment. I was briefly in like media entertainment, which is a very cutthroat like industry that is like not my cup of tea personally, I realized after being in it. Happy to talk more about it later. But this honestly, like all of my academic experiences really kind of restored my faith in humanity a little bit and just like seeing how supportive all of your peers are. There's of course other resources. The second years are really helpful. There's a whole army of TAs surrounding each core class. There's tutoring, there's like office hours. So there's never really a shortage, but sometimes you just need to like have a breakdown at 11 p.m. and your peers will be there for you.
I appreciate that, Linda. I actually remember chatting with you as you were going through the
Oh
first
yeah,
part of
thanks,
your
thanks.
core.
Great, great. That's great
You
to
and
hear.
Malik, actually, you two are super funny to see how quickly you've gone from where you were at that start of your education to where you are today. It's actually really amazing to see from my seat. And I appreciate every moment of it. I've seen 4 cycles of students sort of go through this genesis, and it always happens very quickly, but you all are so different in such a short amount of time. And I'm curious, we have the opportunity as a school, and we definitely spend the resources to sort of curate an environment, right? But all of that is to say that, while you're in this environment, it might be curated, but eventually you all are going back out into the workforce, right? Which is an environment that definitely is not curated. And so I'm curious to know, in what ways has your experiences or have your experiences at SOM sort of shaped your leadership ability and willingness to sort of go back out into the workforce and address some of the things that you might have encountered here?
I can touch that. And I think especially for me, just given like where I reached in my career, like being chief of staff already at like the mayor's office and like having an executive level role. Just to be frank, like, like the MBA, it was more than just a checkbox, just because I came to SOM, but I'll say it kind of started off with just being like, this is just, kind of like a checkbox. Like, I feel like I'm going to go back into potentially doing the work that I'm so passionate about. And coming here, I'll say it just helped me just understand different types of stakeholders that, are really necessary. I'm sorry. It helped me understand different types of stakeholders. I'm sorry, I just got a phone call that's declined them. But no, it helped me understand just different types of stakeholders that were necessary, like when you're trying to get a project done. So from coming from like most of my career in government, I was always aware of community being a stakeholder, but definitely coming to business school here, I was able to just really understand like, okay, hey, here's the role of the investor, here's the role of, like competitor, here's the role of like managers and non-managerial staff, just to, just really think through like what needs to get done when we are really trying to enact on successful public-private partnerships or any kind of partnership. So I'll say that has been my one really good takeaway from, or one good takeaway that I've had from SOM is just really being able to think about different types of stakeholders and how they interact with both business and society.
Amazing. Thank you, Malik. And, of course, time is betraying us, but I'm going to ask two important questions that I definitely want to get this out into the ether and into the world, right? Because as people sort of start to navigate their business school journey, probably not so surprisingly, most people go to sort of different forums and things like that. And a lot of people call SOM the impact school. And I have been on a quest for the last 4 years in this space to define that because we don't market ourselves as that, right? And so it's clear that that's a byproduct of the folks who come here. But I've also found that every student and alumni that I've had the privilege of interacting with quantifies impact in a different way, right? After going through the multiple stakeholder perspectives and all of these things, right? So I think it's easy to say right now in this moment that impact doesn't just mean going into the nonprofit sector, right? Impact doesn't just mean going into government or anti-capitalism or all of these things, right? Like it means something completely innate and different, I think, to each and every SOMer. And so I'd love to hear maybe from one or two of you what impact means to you and how you might be, or how you might say you've been prepared over the last few months to years here at SOM to sort of champion that in your career, irrespective of where you're going. And I know we have a few consultants and others on the call just based off of your intros. And so I'd love to hear from some of you.
I can start, especially as a consultant without like the traditional impact background. So for me, impact has always been how I can help improve people around me in my community. And you might just be like, so then why are you going to consulting? And not like changing the world. And like, so for me, I think it comes in multiple situations. Consulting has given me kind of the economic access and resources to also go out and help your community. And the way Yale SOM kind of treats the learning and the community and the culture is that it allows you to kind of be holistic. Like it is really important to um, increase shareholder value and make good decisions because at the end of the day, you need to have the community around you ticking. But it also gives you the opportunity to become a leader in the New Haven community in the nonprofit space. Like I said before, I'm on the nonprofit board fellow, and I'm able to see how our group, which is impact like focused on this community of color and making space so that we can find each other room to succeed and grow. So it's kind of just like a holistic view of impact. And I feel like New Yale is kind of giving me the opportunity to like try to take those skills and like my life outside of work and really foster and grow that community back in Boston where I'm going to go and then my hometown as well.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in here because I guess I was one of those people who came into SOM with a bit of a nonprofit background. So the job that I had directly prior to SOM was at a nonprofit, and I came to SOM for the nonprofit mission. And I think I came with a very narrow view of what impact could be. I almost came in with the sense that like, oh, I have to go into philanthropy or directly managing a nonprofit to make any impact. And I think what I've realized here is that it takes a much broader view. Like there are so many different ways for you to make impact and really integrate it into everyday life without needing to feel like morally superior because you're sacrificing your whole life to do a nonprofit. Because frankly, like, and I can talk about this more in the breakout room after, but I had like a dream job before SOM, like working in an like Asian American advocacy space, and it also burned me out, and I wasn't sure if it was sustainable. And now at the same time, I'm realizing how much impact you can make in really any industry. And that can look like, especially today, especially in this group, like what allyship means, right? Like the material impact you can make by standing up for a coworker or mentoring like a coworker of color within your workplace, right? It might be like a new grad in your workplace. Right now, I'm part of Dorm Room Fund, and I have the privilege of hearing pitches and from founders of color who receive a disproportionately small amount of venture funding, right? And so in terms of that, like I feel like you're able to make impact in many different ways. And I think in insofar as SOM is the quote like nonprofit school, I think that is what we've learned is that you can make impact in many different positions within business and in society.
Well, and I'm sorry, and I'll be really quick with this one too. But one thing that I just really want to touch on is that you don't have to like choose between getting paid well and doing well. And that's something that I've been reminded of, especially like when I'm reminded of just like my pre-MBA salary too. Let's be frank, like seeing some of like the private salaries, like you really can do good work and still get paid well. And I think that I knew that coming into school, but like SOM too just like helped me double down on that. So I think that that's something I just really want to uplift. Like, don't think that like we're like a school that's like encouraging people to like, just take low income jobs and like, go save the world. Like, that's not very much so like the energy here because that's not scalable. That is not scalable, as Linda kind of touched too.
Thank you all. I appreciate that. I'm never shocked to hear what impact means to our students. And even as I speak with them and work with them, I start to define what it means for me, right? Like I definitely have a reason why I engage the particular work that I do, and the particular folks that I do. And it's actually really lovely to sort of put on a different lens, right? And so if I was to summarize what I see as a big characteristic of how folks engage with impact and this idea of business and society at SOM, I think it's our students and our faculty and staff are willing to sort of do the mental gymnastics of thinking through everything, even if they're going to make a bottom line decision or a decision that maps back to whatever the case may be. They've sat down and thought how this impacts all folks at the table, and maybe not at the table, right? And so I think that that's a really amazing part of the experience that sort of organically comes out and allows folks, I think it being undefined really allows folks to find that answer meaningfully throughout their 2 years here. And with that, I want to close this portion of our conversation by asking one of the leaders from each of the groups to just share how affinity groups support one another and perhaps how you support incoming students, particularly as they ramp up into this sometimes arduous MBA world, right? All at once at the start of their journey. We recognize, right, that this can be a lot. You're meeting 600 people over the span of a week, and you're starting classes together, and you're getting back into an organization of education that for most people you've been out of for a few years. And so how do your individual groups support one another? We'll close on this question, maybe take 30 seconds to a minute each to share that, and then this will be perfect primer material to head into the breakout rooms. Maiya, it looks like you unmuted first.
Yay. So I'm super excited to talk about this because BBA was definitely a huge part, Black Business Alliance was a huge part of the reason why I chose to come to SOM. Malik is definitely one of the major stakeholders in my success here, along with other BBA members as well. Just from day one, like after getting into SOM, I felt like I relied less on like resources like MLT, and like eventually it would be consortium, and more so on the people who are actually here. I came to welcome weekend in January because I was round one, and I feel like BBA, they just like welcomed me with open arms. They ran right up to me and my partner. They like started introducing themselves. We had our own private event. It was incredible because it was just so nice and intimate. And when you come to SOM, you'll know that like that's the vibe of the school is like intimate, which I love. So then also like over the summer, like navigating all the MBA programs, I relied heavily on BBA members who have gone through the same thing. And then when I got here, I was still like, okay, like, where am I? What am I doing? BBA, always there for after school extracurricular stuff like parties, also there for in-school stuff like study sessions with BBA lab, and then mentorship as well has been super huge with my last couple of months here. So can't say enough about BBA. Super excited to talk more in the breakout rooms.
I can go next, and I'll answer this one with a parable. Basically, a week after I got into SOM, I received like a consortium lookbook, which you guys will too if you're in the consortium. It's basically just once you get in, Yale will send you like resources in the way of a lookbook with people's names and faces that are also in the consortium and that are looking to help. The first person who got back to my cold outreach was Nathan Perez. I think his response time was about 18 seconds. Without knowing who I was or really anything about me other than like my cold email intro line, he got on the phone and I think I even took more than 30 minutes. I think we ended up talking for like 45 minutes or an hour. And he basically just laid out everything about pre-MBA recruiting. Even though it didn't sound like I knew if I wanted to do consulting or some other path, he was helpful with just data dumping everything he had to share with me. And that was the best introduction, I think, in terms of what was to come at Yale. He got on the phone with basically a complete stranger, not even knowing if I was going to come to Yale, and was willing to like share his journey and all the knowledge and like golden nuggets of information that he had gathered along the way. And coming to Yale and meeting other people in Alba and Alas and Mina. I'm actually, for context, a bit of a mix. My dad's Lebanese, my mom's Cuban. I'm also Jewish from my mother's side. So I have a few conflicting sometimes identities. And yeah, Yale has been very helpful with, just kind of feeling welcomed. Every group is very open and warm and dying to meet you. So that was my experience with Nathan, and that was also my experience with the rest of the community here at school, and it will be yours as well.
I'll just add on here that when I came, I'm not sure if it was for New Student Welcome Weekend or somewhere else, but Linda was actually one of the first people I ever met at SOM. I think she was hosting Apia's club fair, and she was there, and I think that was kind of how we first met. I think we try to design the affinity clubs to kind of be a mix of both like social value and like other like professional development value. So we bring in a whole bunch of speakers. We bring in Asian American, business leaders to kind of share their experience. We do a lot of family dinners. I think just recently we had sort of a massive event where we break out all of kind of the club members into different families based on the zodiac, and then we're kind of fostering, these small group dinners so that people within the club have the tools to basically connect with each other. I think I have gotten the most out of Apia because I just feel like sometimes when I communicate with other fellow Asian Americans, there's always this kind of underlying communication and understanding that's going on. And so I'm happy to talk more about that. But Linda and Apia has been great for me.
Wait,
Amazing.
sorry, can I just jump
Go
in
ahead.
real quick? One more thing is that during welcome weekends, we always try to host dinners, and I'm sure all of these affinity clubs do as well. So if you do end up coming to SOM for a welcome weekend, please do seek these out so that you guys can get placed into our dinners because we'd love to meet you.
Thank you, folks. I love that our first years sort of took that off too. And it's cool to see the synergy even between how you all found your way to these groups. So students fully staff these panels, right? And so I think it's pretty amazing that there's synergy there. And I will say, I'm currently preparing that consortium lookbook, and Kane was definitely one of the first folks to fill out the form. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that I love, not only that our students are pretty collaborative, but they're definitely interested in paying it back, right? And so I think that that's where we'll end for today. To our online and virtual audience that's watching the recording, thank you so much. And we can end that piece here. And then for those of you